X paid a doctor to kill the Korean Mafia boss's pregnant wife. His next move shocked everyone. The doctor's hands don't shake. That's the first thing Kang Min-jae notices when he walks into the private hospital room and sees the syringe already prepped on the steel tray. The second thing he notices is how his ex-wife, Seo-yeon, stands too close to the window, calm, poised, her cream coat unbuttoned like she's just visiting. She doesn't look at him when he enters. She doesn't need to. On the bed, Adanna's eyes find his. She's 6 months pregnant. The IV line runs into her left arm. Her right hand rests on her stomach, protective, deliberate. She doesn't say anything. She just watches him, waiting. The doctor clears his throat. The medication is ready, Mr. Kang, as discussed. Min-jae's jaw tightens. The tattoo on the side of his neck, a thin, coiled serpent, shifts as he swallows. He looks at Seo-yeon, then at the doctor, then at Adanna. "Get out," he says quietly. Seo-yeon finally turns. Her smile is small, controlled. "Min-jae. Both of you now. First time here, you're already in, stay close. The next story's already in motion." 3 weeks earlier, Adanna Okafor was not supposed to be in Seoul. She'd come for a consulting contract, 6 months, maybe 8, helping a local tech startup navigate international partnerships. Clean work, structured, the kind of job that let her keep her distance from anything too personal, too messy. She was good at boundaries. She'd learned early that emotional entanglements were expensive, and she wasn't interested in paying that cost again. The meeting that changed everything happened in a restaurant she didn't choose. Her client had insisted. A private room at Mugunghwa, one of those places where the waitstaff moved like shadows and the walls absorbed sound. She'd arrived on time, dressed in a charcoal blazer and low heels, her locks pulled back in a neat bun. Professional, unremarkable. The client was late. The man already seated in the room was not. Kang Min-jae didn't look up when she walked in. He was reading something on his phone, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. Black suit, no tie. The kind of stillness that made you notice him even when he wasn't moving. When he finally glanced at her, his expression didn't change. "Wrong room," he said in English, flat, dismissive. Adanna checked the number on the door. "I don't think so. You're not who I'm waiting for." "Neither are you." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then his phone buzzed. He read the message, set the phone down, and leaned back in his chair. "Your client isn't coming. He sent you instead." "I'm not a replacement. I'm the consultant." "Then you're in the wrong meeting." She should have left. She knew that even then. But there was something about the way he said it, not hostile, just factual, that made her stay. She sat down across from him, folded her hands on the table, and met his gaze. "If I leave, your deal doesn't happen. If I stay, we talk terms. Either way, I'm not wasting my time pretending I don't know what this is." He studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "What do you think this is?" "A negotiation. One where someone's already decided I'm not worth hearing out. And if you're wrong, then you'll tell me what you actually want, and we'll see if I can deliver it." He picked up his whiskey, took a slow sip, and set it down. "You're American. Nigerian American. You don't work for people like your client. I work for people who pay me to solve problems. What they do outside of that isn't my business." "It should be." She didn't flinch. "Are you trying to scare me off, or are you just wasting both our time?" That's when he laughed, quiet, genuine, like she'd surprised him. He gestured to the seat. "Sit, let's talk." 2 hours later, she understood 3 things. Kang Min-jae ran one of the most powerful crime syndicates in Seoul. Her client owed him money and had sent her as a buffer. And Min-jae had no intention of letting her leave until he decided what she was worth. But he didn't threaten her. He didn't need to. He just made it clear that the consulting contract she thought she had didn't exist anymore. What existed now was a choice: walk away and explain to her client why the deal collapsed, or stay and fix the mess he'd created. She chose to stay, not because she was afraid, but because walking away meant losing 6 months of income and burning a professional bridge she couldn't afford to burn. That night, she called her best friend back in Atlanta. "He's dangerous," Adanna said quietly, standing on the balcony of her serviced apartment, the city lights stretching out below her. "Then leave." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" Adanna didn't answer right away. She thought about the way Min-jae had looked at her across the table, not like she was a problem to solve, but like she was a variable he hadn't accounted for. "I'll be fine. I just need to be smart." "That's what you said about Marcus." "This isn't Marcus." "No, it's worse." Maybe it was. The next week she saw him 3 more times, always in controlled settings. His office, a private lounge, a car with tinted windows. He never touched her, never raised his voice. But he watched her the way predators watch prey, not with hunger but with patience. She watched him back. She noticed the way his men deferred to him without question, the way he made decisions in seconds that other people would agonize over for days, the way he never apologized, never explained, never justified. He simply was. And she noticed the tattoo on his neck, the serpent, coiled and still, like it was waiting for the right moment to strike. "Why do you keep staring at it?" he asked one night. They were in his car, heading back to her apartment after a tense meeting with a rival crew. She'd been there as a witness, his witness, though she still wasn't sure why. "I'm not starring." "You are." She looked out the window. "It's well done, that's all." "It's a reminder." "Of what?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then quietly, "That patience is a weapon." She turned to look at him. His profile was sharp in the dim light, his jaw set, his eyes focused on the road ahead. She wanted to ask what he was waiting for, but she didn't. Because she was starting to think the answer was her. Seoul appeared 2 weeks after Adanna started working with Min-jae. She didn't announce herself. She simply walked into the restaurant where Adanna was meeting Min-jae, sat down at their table without asking, and ordered tea in perfect, clipped Korean. She was beautiful in a way that felt deliberate: sleek black hair, tailored coat, pearl earrings. Everything about her screamed control. Min-jae didn't react. He just kept eating. Seoul turned to Adanna and smiled. "You must be the American consultant." Adanna set down her chopsticks. "And you are?" "Someone who's known Min-jae much longer than you have." That's not an answer." Seoul's smile widened. "No, it's a warning." Min-jae finally looked up. "Seoul, leave." "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to remind you of your priorities." "I don't need reminders." "Don't you?" She glanced at Adanna, then back at him. "You've been distracted. People are noticing." "People can notice whatever they want. Not when it threatens the family." The word landed like a blade. Adanna felt the shift in the room, subtle but unmistakable. Min-jae's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around his glass. "We're done here," he said quietly. Seoul stood, smoothing her coat. She looked at Adanna one more time. "Be careful. Men like him don't protect the people they care about. They protect what's useful." Then she left. Adanna waited until the door closed. "Ex-wife?" "Yes." "Does she usually show up uninvited?" "Only when she thinks I'm making a mistake." "And am I a mistake?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "I don't know yet." It should have been a red flag. It should have been enough to make her walk away. But instead, it made her lean in closer. "What does she want from you?" "Control, respect, proof that leaving me was the wrong choice." "And what do you want from me?" He didn't answer. He just poured her more tea and changed the subject. "The pregnancy wasn't planned." It happened 6 weeks after that dinner. 6 weeks of late-night conversations, of proximity that felt too deliberate to be accidental, of moments where his hand brushed hers and neither of them pulled away. She told herself it was just proximity, just circumstance, just two people caught in a situation neither of them had chosen. But that wasn't true, and she knew it. The night it happened, they were in his penthouse. She'd been there to review documents, legitimate ones this time, and the work had stretched into hours. He'd offered her a drink, then another. They talked about things that had nothing to do with business, her childhood in Houston, his years in Tokyo, the weight of expectations neither of them had asked for. And then, somewhere between the third drink and the silence that followed, the distance between them collapsed. She woke up the next morning in his bed, alone. He was already dressed, standing by the window, looking out at the city. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. They both knew what had just shifted. 2 weeks later, she took the test. She stared at the two lines for a full minute before she let herself feel anything. Then she felt everything at once: panic, disbelief, anger, fear, and underneath it all something quieter, something that felt like inevitability. She told him that night, no preamble, no softening, just the facts. "I'm pregnant." He didn't move, didn't speak. For a moment she thought he hadn't heard her. Then he set down his glass, walked over to her, and placed both hands on her shoulders. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "What do you want to do?" The fact that he asked, that he didn't assume, didn't demand, didn't try to control the narrative, was the only reason she didn't walk out. "I don't know yet." "Then we'll figure it out." "Wait." "Yes." She searched his face for doubt, for hesitation, for the moment he'd pull away. But he didn't. He just stood there, steady, certain, like this was already decided. "This complicates everything," she said quietly. "I know. Your ex-wife will find out." "I know. And when she does—" His jaw tightened. "She won't touch you." But he was wrong. Seo-yeon found out 3 days later. Adanna didn't know how. She didn't know who told her or whether someone had been watching them all along. All she knew was that Seo-yeon called Min-jae's phone while Adanna was standing right there, and when he answered, the first thing Seo-yeon said was, "Congratulations. I hear you're going to be a father." The line went dead. Min-jae stared at the phone for a long moment, then looked at Adanna. "Pack a bag, you're moving." "I'm not running." "This isn't running, this is strategy." "She doesn't scare me." "She should." And for the first time since she'd met him, she heard something in his voice that made her believe him. Not anger, not frustration, fear. He moved her that night to a private apartment in Gangnam. High security, limited access, his people stationed at every corner. She hated it. Hated the cage it represented. Hated that he was right. But she stayed, because the alternative was pretending she was safe when she wasn't. 2 weeks later, Seo-yeon made her first move. It started small. A message on Adanna's phone from an unknown number: "You're not the first. You won't be the last." Then a photo, Adanna leaving the apartment, time-stamped, precise. Then a name, the doctor, Dr. Lim Yi-sung, a private obstetrician, one of the best in Seoul, and according to the message, one who owed Seo-yeon a favor. Adanna showed Min-jae the messages. He read them in silence, his face unreadable. Then he made a single call. The next day, Dr. Lim's clinic was under new management. But the message had been sent. Seo-yeon wasn't just watching, she was moving pieces into place. And Adanna was the target. The trap closed 3 days before the hospital room. Adanna had started feeling off, dizzy, nauseous, more than the usual pregnancy symptoms. She'd brushed it off at first, but when the cramping started, Min-jae insisted she see a doctor. Not Dr. Lim, someone else, someone he trusted. But the someone he trusted wasn't available, and the someone who was, Dr. Lim. Adanna didn't know that until she was already in the examination room. By then, it was too late. Dr. Lim was polite, professional, thorough. He ran tests, checked her vitals, told her everything looked fine but recommended she stay overnight for observation. Standard procedure, he said, just to be safe. Min-yi didn't like it. Adanna could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked every movement Dr. Lim made. But there was no medical reason to refuse, so she stayed. That night, she woke up to voices outside her door. Dr. Lim and someone else, a woman. Adanna's heart stopped. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew the cadence of Seo-yeon's voice by now, knew the way it wrapped around commands and made them sound like suggestions. She reached for her phone, texted Min-yi. "She's here." He didn't respond, but 15 minutes later the door to her room opened and he walked in, calm, controlled, but the fury in his eyes was unmistakable. "We're leaving." Dr. Lim appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Kang, I really must insist." "You insist on nothing. There are protocols. And there are consequences. Move." Dr. Lim stepped aside. Min-yi helped Adanna out of the bed, his hand firm on her arm, and they walked out of the hospital together. No one stopped them. But the damage was already done. Because the next morning Min-yi received a call, a video, Adanna in the hospital bed, Dr. Lim holding the syringe, and Seo-yeon's voice calm and clear. "You have 24 hours to make a choice, her or everything you've built. I'll be waiting." Min-yi didn't tell Adanna about the video right away. He brought her back to the penthouse, stationed his most trusted men at every entrance, and made a series of calls in a language she couldn't follow. She watched him from the couch, her hand resting on her stomach, and knew something had shifted. He wasn't just angry, he was calculating. "What did she say?" Adanna asked finally. He looked at her. "She wants me to choose." "Between what? You or the family?" The words hung in the air between them. Adanna felt the weight of them settle in her chest, cold and heavy. She'd known this was coming. She'd known from the moment Seo-yeon walked into that restaurant that this wasn't just about jealousy or pride. This was about power, and power didn't negotiate. "What are you going to do?" she asked. He sat down beside her. "I'm going to protect you." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer." She turned to face him fully. "Min-yi, if she's forcing you to choose, you have to understand what you're giving up. This isn't just about us. This is about everything you've built. Your reputation, your position, your—" "I don't care." "You should." "Why?" "Because I'm not worth it." He stared at her. Then he reached out, slow and deliberate, and placed his hand over hers. "Don't decide what you're worth to me." It was the first time he'd said anything close to a confession, and it terrified her more than any threat Seo-yeon had made. Because if he chose her, he'd lose everything, and if he lost everything, he'd eventually resent her for it. That's how these stories always ended. She'd seen it before, lived it before. "I won't let you destroy yourself for me," she said quietly. "Then it's a good thing you don't get to decide." The meeting happened the next day. Min-yi arranged it at a neutral location, a private club in Itaewon, the kind of place where deals were made and blood was never spilled because it was bad for business. Seo-yeon arrived exactly on time, flanked by two men Adanna didn't recognize. She looked immaculate, untouchable. Min-yi had insisted Adanna stay at the penthouse, but she'd refused. If this was about her, she needed to see it. She needed to understand what she was costing him. So she sat in the corner of the room, silent, while Min-yi and Seo-yeon faced each other across a low table. "You look tired," Seo-yeon said. "Fatherhood doesn't suit you yet." Min-yi didn't respond. Seo-yeon smiled. "I'll make this simple, end it, send her back to America, pretend the child doesn't exist. I'll make sure the family forgets this ever happened. And if I don't, then I'll make sure the child never takes its first breath." The room went cold. Adanna's hand tightened on the armrest. She felt the weight of every eye in the room shift toward her, felt the suffocating certainty that Seo-yeon wasn't bluffing. Min-yi leaned back in his chair. You think I'd let you touch her? I don't think I know. Because the moment you chose her over the family, you lost the only thing that kept you untouchable. Loyalty. She tilted her head. How many of your men do you think would choose you over their own survival, over the family name, over the order you've spent years building? Enough. Are you sure? Silence. Seo-yeon stood. You have until tomorrow morning. After that I act. And I don't bluff, Min-yi, you know that. She walked out. Adanna couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because everything Seo-yeon had just said was true, and they both knew it. Min-yi stood slowly, walked over to her, and crouched down so they were eye level. Listen to me, he said quietly. I'm not giving you up, I'm not sending you away, and I'm not letting her win, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe him, but trust was expensive, and she'd already paid too much. What are you going to do? Something she won't expect. The next morning, Min-yi called Seo-yeon and told her he'd made his choice. He arranged the meeting at the same private hospital where Dr. Lim worked, public enough to seem legitimate, private enough to control. He told Seo-yeon that he'd decided to handle it quietly. No scandal, no fallout, just a medical procedure and a quiet severance. Seo-yeon agreed. She even brought Dr. Lim herself as insurance. That's when Adanna realized what Min-yi was doing. He wasn't choosing, he was setting a trap. When Seo-yeon and Dr. Lim walked into that hospital room and saw Adanna on the bed, they thought they'd won. They thought Min-yi had bent, broken. But the moment Min-yi walked in and saw that syringe, the moment he saw Seo-yeon standing there like she'd already claimed victory, everything snapped into focus. He told them to leave, not because he was surrendering, but because he was testing. Dr. Lim left immediately. He didn't even look back. He knew when he'd lost. But Seo-yeon stayed. She stayed because she needed to see it, needed to watch him break. And that's when Min-yi made his move. He turned to her, his voice low and calm. You were right about one thing. Loyalty is everything, but you forgot who taught me that. Seo-yeon's smile faltered. You think I didn't know you paid him? Min-yi gestured toward the empty doorway where Dr. Lim had fled. You think I didn't know every single person you've contacted in the last month, every move you've made? Her face went pale. I let you build this trap. I let you think you had control, because I needed to know how far you'd go, and now I do. He stepped closer. You threatened my child. You threatened her. That's not strategy. That's desperation. Min-jae. You wanted me to choose, so I did. I choose the one person in this room who's never lied to me, who's never tried to control me, who's never used my own family against me. He looked at Adanna, then back at Seo-yeon. You're done. Seo-yeon's composure cracked. You can't. I already did. The family voted this morning. Unanimous, you're out. The words hit like a physical blow. Seo-yeon staggered back, her hand gripping the window frame for balance. You can't do this to me. I didn't, you did it to yourself. He walked past her, took Adanna's hand and helped her off the bed. They walked out of that room together and Seo-yeon didn't follow. She just stood there, frozen, watching the life she'd tried to reclaim slip through her fingers. Outside, Adanna finally let herself breathe. They sat in the car in silence for a long time. She didn't ask him how he'd done it, didn't ask what it had cost. She just held his hand and tried to process the fact that she was still here, still whole, still carrying his child. Why didn't you tell me? She asked finally. Because I needed you to be afraid. I needed Seo-yeon to believe she'd won. If you'd known, you would have tried to stop me or protect me, and I couldn't let you do either. She pulled her hand away. You used me. I protected you. You made me bait. I made you safe. She stared at him, anger and relief warring in her chest. You can't do that again. You can't make choices for me and call it protection. That's not how this works." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that looked like regret. "You're right, I'm sorry." 2 words she didn't think he was capable of saying. She leaned back in the seat, closed her eyes, and let the tension drain from her body. "If we're doing this, if we're really doing this, you have to let me in, all the way. No more secrets, no more strategies I'm not part of. Deal? And I need space, real space, not a gilded cage. Deal? And therapy for both of us. Because this," she gestured between them, "this is not healthy yet, and I'm not raising a child in chaos." He smiled, small, genuine. Deal. 3 months later, Adanna gave birth to a daughter. Min-jae was there, holding her hand, breathing with her, staying present in a way she hadn't thought he was capable of. When the nurse placed the baby in her arms, Adanna looked down at the tiny face and felt something shift inside her, something she couldn't name, couldn't control, couldn't protect herself from. Min-jae leaned over, his hand resting gently on the baby's head. "She has your eyes. She has your stubbornness." He laughed, quiet, real. They named her Zainab, a name that meant beauty and grace, a name that carried both of their worlds. And for the first time since this all started, Adanna let herself believe they might actually make it. Seoul never came back. Min-jae had made sure of that, not through violence, not through threats, but through something more permanent, exile. She'd been removed from the family, her assets frozen, her reputation destroyed. She tried to fight it at first, hearing lawyers calling in favors, but no one would touch her, not after what she'd done. Adanna didn't ask what happened to Dr. Lim. She didn't want to know. What she did know was that Min-jae had kept his word. He'd protected her, he'd chosen her, and he'd paid the cost. Because choosing her had meant restructuring the entire family. It had meant forcing the old guard to accept that he wasn't the man they thought he was, that he wouldn't sacrifice the people he loved for the sake of tradition. Some of them respected him more for it, others left. But he didn't seem to care. He just kept moving forward, building something new, something better. And Adanna stayed, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. 1 year later, they were sitting on the balcony of the penthouse, Zainab asleep in her crib inside. The city stretched out below them, glittering and endless. "Do you ever regret it?" Adanna asked. "Regret what?" "Choosing me, giving up what you had." He was quiet for a long time, then he turned to look at her. "I didn't give anything up. I just stopped pretending I could build a life on fear and loyalty alone. You taught me that." "I didn't teach you anything." "You did. You taught me that power without love is just control, and control isn't worth having." She smiled, leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're getting soft." "Maybe." "Good, Zainab's going to need that." He kissed the top of her head. "So will you." And for once she didn't argue. Because maybe, just maybe, they'd both learned something. That love wasn't weakness. It was the only thing strong enough to survive the weight of the choices they'd made. And that was enough. But sometimes, late at night, when Zainab was asleep and Min-jae was working in his office, Adanna would stand by the window and think about the hospital room, about the syringe, about the moment she'd looked into his eyes and wondered if he would choose her. She'd never asked him what he would have done if Seoul hadn't taken the bait, if the plan had failed, if he'd actually had to choose. Because some questions didn't have good answers, and some costs were too high to name. So tell me, when the people you love become the weapons used against you, how do you decide what's worth protecting?